Welcome to the Future of Structures podcast, where we talk to the experts who are evolving our buildings for tomorrow. And here is your host, Adam Jones.
Today we are speaking with Vadim Smakdin. He's the co-founder of Chronotope and Chief Technology Officer of Habitatum. So they are doing some awesome work who are helping us to understand the urban environment through advanced analysis of data in both space and time. And we're going to talk about this example in the interview. But one of the cool capabilities of the technology is to take information from places such as our social media and put them through certain filters and then help us measure the emotional reactions that we have to a place in time and geographic location. So the case study we're going to talk about in this interview is of Barcelona. So Chronotope compared the sentiment of the city attractions by comparing the tweets of tourists and comparing them to locals. And obviously this data can be used by city planners to make better decisions about what they do with the cities and how it might interact or affect the locals compared to how it affects tourists. So there are many ways you can use this data analysis to make better decisions in the city. And I hope you guys enjoy this conversation I had with Vadim. I learnt a lot. I hope you guys do too. Without any further ado, here is Vadim Smakdin.
Yeah, so I'm a CTO of Habitatum. Habitatum is an urban analytics company, and previously we did a lot of in-house analytics for different clients, urban planners, architects, but at some point we decided to transition from analytical company to software company. So we started to develop our software, which is called Chronotope. So I'm a technical director of Habitatum and one of core technology leaders of Chronotope software. Yep. And I started my journey as an engineer. I started studying in Russia, and actually I finished my master's degree in Russia and planned to do a PhD somewhere else, yep. But then stopped. Yeah. Unfortunately, started to work, and but this is an interesting journey for me because before I joined Habitatum, I did a lot of visualization projects which were more artistically oriented. So I'm trying to explore how we can rethink the data visualization itself, because I thought about like a spatial data visualization, how we can use projection for it. Also, we did a lot of interactive projects on data visualization, so how we can interact with data visualization by our body, by our fingers and so on and so forth. But this project's always lacked. I mean, it's always was artistic, so it's never had any production applications. So and because another my colleague that did a lot of these artistic projects with me was architect, we always tried to connect this artistic data visualization to architecture, yep. But we didn't know how.
Yeah, so it's one of the coolest things I've seen. If the data visualization where you've got and we'll probably get further into it a bit later, but where you plot it on the map of, so you got the location versus time. It's really one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I've never seen anything quite like it. Any data being displayed like this.
Yeah, this data visualization concept comes from a geographer called Thorsten Hegerstrand. And this geographer, he was first who introduced the term spatial temporal geography. Yeah. So, but basically, Hegerstrand looked into map as a journey. So he imagined a journey through the map, and like you're moving through the map, but this map is not flat. it's three-dimensional, and the third dimension is time. So you are moving from bottom to top and exploring this map and feeling differently at different periods of time. And what we are trying to do in this spatial temporal visualization is to combine different types of data inside of this spatial temporal thing. Let's call it like this, but it is actually a matrix. And so, if you come back to this Hegerstrand concept of a journey, which involves a lot of thoughts, right? Because journey is how you see space, how you think about space, how you consume this space. So we this three-dimensional map allows you to visualize not only a movements of a subjects, of people, cars, dogs, cats, but it also allows you to visualize people's thoughts, how people think about space in time. And because we are using this the same model for different types of data, like thoughts or movements, we can actually correlate them or intersect them. So we can, for example, check where people move at this time of day, and at the same time how people think about this place at the same time of day. And actually this allows us to get a really interesting results. For example, in Barcelona, we researched how people who are local to Barcelona correlate with tourists, because there is a huge discussion going on that because of extreme touristic activity in Barcelona, it's almost suffering it. I mean, because tourists not only introducing capital into city and allow its market grow, but tourists also consume the city. And this consumption can be somehow painful. Maybe not for the city's infrastructure, but instead for city's local community. And this is why currently there's a discussion that maybe Barcelona government should somehow limit this touristic activity and don't or just not limit, or just don't just don't involve any new types of activities for tourists, so they will stop coming with these huge waves. So to analyze this phenomena, we did a really simple analysis. We took a Twitter data for 2 or 3 months and analyzed it for locals and tourists. So we just looked into historical data in Twitter and checked if person who uses Twitter was in some place before he used Twitter in Barcelona. And so that's allowed us to split data set into 2 parts, into tourists and locals. Then we visualized this in space-time and just looked when in this 3-dimensional cube tourists and locals are intersecting. And what we found that locals and tourists only intersect in this iconic areas like Sagrada Familia, Gothic area, and also they don't even intersect in during the whole day. They intersect in evening and also during lunch or something like this. But there is a lot of gaps in this pattern. So what we propose as a solution is what we call a space-time coordination. So we can somehow coordinate a tourist flow through the city that in time, not in space, it will not intersect with the local community. And this is fully possible. And these findings, they're truly obvious. But while we have this visualization, it allows us to discuss this phenomena more more targeted.
Yeah.
So we can target specific places, specific time when people are intersecting, and do decisions accordingly. Because otherwise, there is this topic. It's really opinionated. So a lot of people have their opinion on this tourist problem, but they don't have this crystallized subject to discuss it. And this is, I think, a real thing for data visualization. So data visualization, it's a tool that allows various groups of people to discuss their problems. And this is why I think that the data visualization should be really intuitive and interact, because it's a communication tool. And this is not a tool that communicates some story with you. It's a tool that allows you to communicate your idea with another person. But while this data visualization works like a round table or like a map around which you are discussing your ideas, your concepts, and your thoughts.
Yeah, that's amazing. So in Barcelona, they'll be able to see, hotspots where people love it, whether it be tourists or locals, and some areas where they'll hate it. So they'll know exactly, is that for town planning purposes? They might be able to do, make decisions at the government level. Yes.
So what we're trying to do now is to use these tools which we are producing at different urban planning institutions or government institutions, of course, but working with government institutions is really slow. I mean, in terms of startup world.
Yeah.
So successfully focusing on architectural bureaus, for example, who are working on renovation projects. And recently in Moscow, we did a free project for a Moscow renovation competition, which is a competition about there is a bunch of buildings in Moscow which are relatively old.
Yeah.
It's called Khrushchevki. It's buildings that was built in 80s, I think, or something like this. I'm not sure because I'm a software engineer, so I'm not really deep architecture.
Yeah.
And the Moscow government wanted to remove these buildings and build a new type of buildings, more comfortable, on top of it.
Yeah.
But of course, it's really hard to do without any kind of a planning phase. So they did a competition where different architectural bureaus from around the globe, and of course a lot of local one, competed on different areas of Moscow. And we did 3 areas in Moscow together with Zaha Hadid Bureau and also with Meganom. They're quite famous local Moscow architects. Right now they're building this thin skyscraper on Manhattan. Yep. And the third one was MLA Plus, which is also a global architectural bureau. And so we did, with 3 of them, we did a different views to this renovation. Yeah. And as a company, as a software, we supported the decisions. So we, for each architectural bureau, we told that, for example, we told them the day-night patterns of local communities. Also, we analyzed how businesses in these areas works across the time, so we can easily coordinate it with functional planning of buildings. Because, of course, they are not only building an estate for living, they're also creating a business environment. They're creating an offices, some recreational zones inside. So we help them to understand how these zones can be located, where the best areas to locate these zones, and which functions people need most, and the best thing at which time. Because we believe that the age of let's name it hard architecture.
Yeah.
It's almost over, so we need to think about this soft architecture, which is when I translate this into Russian, sounds completely hilarious. But the soft architecture, I think, it's more or less like a fixed term.
Yep.
And we think that we need to really focus on this reconfigurable spaces. We need to focus on how people reuse the space during different time. Maybe if it's not a reconfigurable space, but it's functional target. It can evolve through time or change. And we, I mean, on a project phase, we at least should be ready for it.
Yeah,
so we
amazing.
All of them with this. And what was a hardest thing for us is that we. All of architects say that they want to work with us exclusively. So they thought that maybe we will be some kind of so we will provide the leaks for the projects to other bureaus. But hopefully for us, we worked on these 3 different sites. So these 3 architectural bureaus didn't compete directly. And also, I think what we learned from this project, and they learned as well, is that while we are recommending the functional zoning for space, while we are recommending while we are providing this day-night patterns and all the other stuff, we are not involved in real architecture. I mean, in classical architecture, where you build this shell, where you build an structure for this shell. So we are not involved in it completely. Yeah. So because of this, we are working as a base map, as a base layer on which you can put your project. And our job was to provide as much detailed base map as possible. Yeah. And of course, this base map can be shared with different architects, with different businesses who are involved in project. And I don't think that, of course, it makes an advantage, but while everyone is using it, it's so I think the competition is fair.
Definitely.
Still, a lot of architects who are working with us still think that maybe somehow they can privatize our software.
Of course.
Impossible.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of firms in Melbourne hoping, or in Australia, be hoping the same thing. It sounds like the first time you can really measure, how people value certain places, and really can measure what people actually want in certain places to make better decisions with planning. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Twitter's one of a bit of the data you collect. Is there any other social platforms where you collect data from?
So actually, what our I think coolest part is we don't collect data at all. So we are working with different data providers like Twitter, yep. And just buying or renting or streaming data from them. So as with for research projects, we of course collect some data using, for example, an open Twitter streaming API, which allow us to stream some portions of Twitter data. But for all commercial projects, we buy data from different data providers, and we don't store it almost. So what we are doing instead, we are providing a pipeline, which was called previously, it doesn't have an official name right now, it's like a data management service, basically. So it's a software which a data provider can install in his current infrastructure, yeah. And this software will aggregate data providers' data, and then send to us basically a heat maps. A lot of heat maps, and each heat map will contain a timestamp, which will allow us to stack this heat map on top of each other, one by one, and create this temporal dimension. So we are working with different telecom operators all around the globe, and we have a good relationships in Russia with one of telecom operators. Also, we are currently working with European one, and of course we are working with social networks, but I think only Twitter right now allows to buy data in a, let's say, simple way. Yep. So Twitter has this data buying pipeline, yep, which previously was realized via GNIP. It's a subsidiary company, Twitter subsidiary company, which allows you to buy data from Twitter. Gotcha. Basically, some managers and some engineers who convert your requests for Twitter data into more or less database query, yeah, to the warehouse.
Awesome.
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask, so with the data, are you able to compare cities at the city level as well to see what some, the city might be lacking based on some of this data?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So the core, one of our core ideas was to create some kind of index, which will allow us to compare cities or districts. But right now, it's more like a concept, because it's on a product level. It's really hard to sell this type of function, because of course we can compare New York, London, and Moscow by Twitter activity. We can, but what we will solve by it, I don't know, honestly. But instead, what we can do, we can focus on more local things. For example, we can plan new streets in cities. We can plan new districts or even regions in cities according to this alternative data, alternative statistics, which we took from social networks, from mobile data, sensor networks. And for example, recently we complete a project with Zaha Hadid in London, where we helped them to make a proposal of making several streets in London, I think 3 streets, and surrounding areas completely car free, and so it's basically only bikes and that's it, I think. Maybe residential cars allowed. And so for them, we did some analytics about, again, at which places people are concentrating, how these places are connected with other places, because it's really important when you ban cars in some place, to allow people still communicate, commute and communicate in this area, because sometimes you can be like 30 minutes walk from a needed function. So functional analysis is really important. So we need to somehow distribute required functions all across area at specific times, so people will feel comfortable. And so we don't need even a bike car. We need to make car unnecessary in this area. And this was our job as consultants on this project. So we did all this functional schemes, schemes about distance in this area, accessibility schemes, and afterwards they did this project that are currently exhibited in London still, I think, or maybe this exhibition is closed, but I don't remember at which place. I can send you the link.
Awesome. So as we're slowly getting to the end now, so what is the most exciting thing for you in the future with your industry you're in?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I think that the most important thing is to resync open data, because we always talk about open data as about data or tables, or we don't understand what is a thing in a data. What is it? What is it?
Yeah.
Is it a table? Is it a database? And I think that we are missing an accessibility point.
Yeah.
Like in a city, it's really important how this function is accessible to you, because even if this transport is super fast, for example, if you have a car that is allows you to move from one point to another in relatively low time, this doesn't make a function accessible, because accessibility of function is first of all amount of information that you know about this function, so you know that this function exists and you can use it. The second thing is the comfort. How comfortably to you is to access this function. So with open data, it's the same talk. So we need to rethink open data accessibility. Because right now we are opening a lot of data in tabular format, for example, for people.
Yep.
But to analyze this data, to understand is it good or bad, for example, a crime statistics, is it a good or bad in my city? Is it going down or increasing over time? To understand the simple question, you need to have this fixed amount of skills. You need to be able to read these tables. I mean, to understand the structure. You also need to able to write a simple Python program or Excel formula or something like this. And I think it's not make this open data really accessible. So what I think we need to do is to create this data portals or something like this, which allows people to explore data, but in a relatively intuitive way. And also, we need to think about this border between aggregated data and unaggregated data, because when we are aggregating data into a single index, for example, we are saying that in this city, it's a huge amount of crimes. Yes, we are making a statement, but it's impossible to understand why it's happening like this. So we need to provide people a complex interface which will allow them to see this, how this data evolves through time. Did we ever had crime number decreased in our history? Or why crime numbers increased? Can we correlate this data with, for example, employment data in our area, or some healthcare data would be also sufficient? So I think that after we will be able to create this simple data portals for people to see our open data, which are currently happening right now, we need to focus on these explorative interfaces, which will allow people to make a simple research over this data. And this will actually make this data open finally, because otherwise when we're opening data, we are not opening knowledge and we are not opening insights, and this is what important.
Amazing. And what do you think will have the biggest impact on the buildings industry in the future? And it can be in any industry that you'd like to go into.
Yeah, so about building industry, it's relatively close to my background, because I studied I studied engineering during my years, and so I think right now we don't have a good base map about where we build. So this is why we are doing this software, Chronotope. So we want to create this like a standard tool which will be used in pre-planning phase or pre-master planning phase. So this is a tool that will allow people to actually understand the real outcomes of the project and support it during time. Because the second thing is, as I told before, it's really I think we are far ahead. We are lacking time in this race between hardware architecture and software architecture. So we are still in this hard and unconvertible buildings. But so the projects in the future should be evolvable. And we need tools which allow us to monitor these projects and to make decisions on how they evolve. evolve. Sorry. So basically, it will be a huge impact if every project will be connected to some kind of an analytical tool, which will allow program managers to understand how this project in park or office building perform through time, and to change its vector. Because in other world we have this pivot, right? Yeah. So we can pivot from a company who produces a machine learning related to which dress you choose, to a company which builds artificial intelligence, which was with DeepMind, for example. But we don't know how to pivot a building, because we can build a trade center. For example, right now it's happening globally. We can build a trade center, a huge one. People will not come. So we can understand the ways how we pivoted usage. And of course, it needs to be supported, but by engineering. We need to have reconfigurable spaces. But still, analytical part, I think it's really important. So we like monitoring tools which will understand when and how.
Amazing. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, Vadim. And if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you? And do you have any other projects that you want to tell us about that you have coming in the pipeline?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, the Habidatum website, we recently updated it. So it's have all our analytical projects and research projects. So also in December, as I told, launched this Chronotope website. I think really informative. Right now we have this closed base of Chronotope, and from I think next week or maybe 2 weeks forward, we will have an open phase. So everybody can sign up and use our software. I think can be interesting for students and research people. Also, we are going to States in the end of February, and we'll be reading workshops and lectures. Probably we will publish lecture program somewhere, but for now I can tell that in beginning of March and of February, some events in New York is planned.
Cool.
Also, we are participating in data community, something like this, which will happen on 6 March, something like this. On March 9th, we will be in MIT, hopefully, and on March 1st or 2nd in Northeastern in Boston.
Hey guys, Adam here. Just before you go, just one quick request. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a review. It helps our rating and ranking on iTunes, so more people can hear from the people who are making our cities better places for our future.